Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining us for the first time, I appreciate your time as always. These are complex times across the continent of Africa, and every African country must go back to the drawing board and start reviewing every aspect of their strategic partnership. We've seen the global complexity at the moment, the Russian-Ukrainian war, the complexity in terms of relationship between the United States of America and the country of China. We've seen the United States of America's tariff, how it's ravaging countries' economies across the continent of Africa. At this moment, we see South Africa comes under tremendous pressure, Egypt, and a whole lot of nations. Nigeria has been called out, and more importantly, we look at the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. More importantly as well, the most abandoned conflict in the continent of Africa, as we see Sudan are pitting it against each other with some global partners pulling the strings behind. African nations must pay attention as the continent at the moment is going through a huge transition, election challenges across the continent of Africa, in Central Africa and East Africa. We've seen the youth are rising up not just from Madagascar but across the continent. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because it comes at a time when those countries in French-speaking Africa, looking at West Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Ivory Coast, you name the rest, Chad and the rest, must at this moment benchmark their partnership with the country of France. Each aspect of their collaboration that they've had with France over the centuries hasn't paid any particular success. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because today I really want to look at the current France Afrique impact and its particular implications on how it put the continent of African nations, those French-speaking, in one position. France Afrique was the most sad thing that ever happened in the continent of Africa. We know of the United States of America's African leaders meeting that was held by former leader Mr. Barack Obama. We saw that also happen with President Joe Biden. And more importantly, at the moment, we saw some effort by Mr. Donald Trump, who brought some African leaders, though that was laughable, but again, he made some effort. More importantly, we have the Chinese African Summit. We saw the FOCAC, investment discussions, collaboration, partnership on a whole lot of areas. The United States of America pulled some strings in a number of areas regards to their effort in bringing the continent of Africa together. That doesn't mean that the United States is a strategic partner at the moment. Considering the Turkish, who came closer and trying to pull the continent of Africa from the perspective of investment and collaboration. We've known other countries like Russia, who again continue to hold the continent of Africa in terms of security and other aspects. I'm talking on global partnerships here. We have also seen members of the European Union that you do not agree with, they continue to pull the continent of Africa to an extent to do something. We've seen other regional nations, more importantly Middle Eastern partners, who continue to go closer to the continent of Africa from a whole lot of investment aspect. Why am I naming all of this? I'm naming all of this to give you a perspective of the reason why France Afrique was the worst thing that ever happened to the continent of Africa, because this organization never had investment in mind, never had a strategic collaboration, never had infrastructural project in mind, never had any social developmental issues in the continent of Africa. France Afrique was an organization that was built for a few. I agree with the Ghanaian leader, talking about the leader of Guinea, who once said that every institution, every organization, especially Africa's global collaboration that is built to benefit a few, will collapse. We've seen those institutions are being collapsed in a number of countries across the region, and France Afrique was the worst organization that African countries, French-speaking, ever come closer. Show me the investment, collaboration, and developmental project that France Afrique brought to the continent of Africa. If you are from Ivory Coast, show me the benefits of France Afrique in your country. Show me if you are from Madagascar. Show me what France Afrique benefited your nation. If you can list the number of projects under this video, I will salute you. Go to the country of Cameroon. Show me what the benefits of France Afrique to your country, an organization that failed to identify itself as a collaborative institution. Go to the country of Senegal. Prove to me what investment project, what developmental institutions that France Afrique brought. Go to Morocco. Show me where are the investment projects that France Afrique brought to your country. Show me, if you are from Tunisia, show me what particular country, particular institutions that France Afrique brought. Go down to countries of Madagascar, considering Ivory Coast, and a whole lot of nations, Mauritania. You continue to name them. Not to talk about the countries of the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who identified that France Afrique was a cancer to the continent of Africa's own advancement and development, because as we all know, this was built on the upper echelon of the continent of African leaders, who some of those leaders never accepted, never wanted this, but as a result of a colonial partnership that they all found themselves as a result of documents that were handed to them, that they had no particular choice, they have to go into it. Make no mistake, France Afrique was a compromised organization that most of the time ensured that the African leaders themselves do not agree with their own nationals and their citizens. In that aspect, they are being provided security from the country of France as a result of the colonial pact that enabled those leaders in some of those countries who were acting in a way that, because they knew that they had a cover from the country of France, for them to continue to do stupid things in their own countries, rig elections, continue to live in the country fat, and more importantly, exploit the natural resources of their nation. When the nationals of those countries got to a point where they cannot handle it anymore, they have to kick the leaders out. France will step in as a result of the bilateral collaborations that they have, and they will come in. We saw that happen in a number of countries, even in Ivory Coast. Most recently in the country of Madagascar, how France's troopers came in and picked up the leader who could not deliver for his people, who could not bring an economic advancement and development and create jobs for young people. France Afrique was one of those institutions that kept the continent of Africa in a particular spot. The current leader of the country of France, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, to an extent, when he came to power, he once said, I am from the generation, in quote, I am from the generation of leaders who do not tell the continent of Africa on what to do. I'm not saying yet that the continent of African leaders or some of those nations haven't had opportunities for them to advance their countries. We've seen nations that you may not agree with, like Rwanda, who have made incredible stride in a whole lot of areas. We've seen other continents of African nations, French-speaking, who have, to an extent, have recognized that it is about time for them to take step. In Montpellier, we saw that the pressure was mounting in an awful lot of African nations, French-speaking. Some of those leaders who refused to attend that particular summit. The current leader, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, thought by bringing African diaspora or bringing a number of African officials who can be influential to talk about the Africans' own continental problem, that was going to be a method or a strategy that will, to an extent, sideline France Afrique and bring a hopeful new model. So to point out, but that model never worked. The underlying effect, unemployment rate, high inflation, lack of jobs, poor infrastructure, and more importantly, poor social services. And you do have a number of those leaders who continue to fly to the country of France at that particular moment to talk about France Afrique. France Afrique was never in the interest of the African nations. French-speaking, France Afrique was never in the interest of the African people. France Afrique was never in the benefits of those leaders themselves who were attending. Some of those leaders recognized that times were changing. The leader of France in Montpellier killed France Afrique. France Afrique has never, to an extent, never ever benefited the African people of those nations. So if you see the system is crumbling at the moment for a failed foreign policy that never was focused on the developmental project in the continent of Africa, it's no doubt. Don't blame the Chinese, don't blame the Russians, don't even blame some of the strategic partners in the European Union. Don't blame even the United States of America, despite the huge blunder that Mr. Donald Trump has also brought to the continent of Africa in terms of his tariff and slashing down the support that has been there, which has always been, a number of people will say, has been the United States of America's soft power in the continent of Africa. France Afrique crumbled a number of countries in the region. So if you see countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and some even the darling of the country of France, Ivory Coast to an extent, and more importantly, new nations who are rediscovering themselves like Chad, calling out the country of France, going back to Guinea, and more importantly, considering what happened in Guinea at that particular time. Mr. Alpha Condé was a big fan of the France Afrique. How did that pay him? We saw other leaders like Mohamed Bazoum, who were big fan of France Afrique. This organization was never, nothing compared, like FOCA, was never, nothing compared, like the United States African Summit, nothing compared to the Russian African Summit. It was not even close to the Turkish African Summit. It was not even close to an extent to the European Union African collaboration. It has never been in the interest of the continent of African citizens, and it never put forward infrastructural developmental project. It was a gathering where leaders come together, sit, eat fat, pop champagne, drink wine, go ahead and make lavish speeches that has nothing to do with the continent of Africa. France's foreign policy was based on that of extortion, manipulation, and more importantly, to an extractive area. This is coming out clear. The Chinese has proven that the continent of Africa can work. The Chinese have demonstrated all over and over in the infrastructure, considering the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative that has seen incredible infrastructural growth across the continent of Africa. Road, bridges, all kinds of highways, considering incredible infrastructural growth in the region. As we will say, if you agree with the Chinese or you do not agree with it, Africans don't need that. Africans need resorts at the moment. So the France Afrique organization was the brim of the collapse of a system that was never meant to benefit a particular region. If you are from one of those French-speaking nations, let me know in the comment section what you think France Afrique was all about. If France Afrique has, again, transformed any infrastructural growth and development in your country, let me know in the comment section. If you feel France Afrique was an organization that was meant to subjugate, to keep a particular people of a region poor, to keep a people without any particular growth and advancement, let me know in the comment section. This institution was an institution that was never laid out from the collaborative perspective, like I've pointed out. But again, it comes at a time when African countries who decided to diversify their partnership, who decided to look for the difficulties that they are going through, not just from the Sahel. We've seen countries like Senegal, who came in out from a system that has been laid out under the France Afrique collaborative aspect that never paid them to an extent. Senegal was very close to an explosive election issues, and at the moment we've seen these countries are diversifying their collaboration and partnership. It was at the moment when Africa must rediscover itself and look at what diversification is all about. Diversification is the bottom line of countries. Most nations across the European Union, despite being under the European Union umbrella, are working with other countries like China. They are working with the United States of America, Middle Eastern partners. African nations who were members of this so-called France Afrique, a destructive institution, never allowed them to flex their collaboration in terms of contracts, never allowed them to diversify their investment strategy, never allowed them to open their borders, more importantly for global trade that could benefit them, never allowed them to take infrastructural developmental growth by themselves by choosing a partner that can do it for them. France Afrique was the worst thing that ever happened to the continent of Africa, and that has been exposed. Mr. Macron in Montpellier himself looked at this organization and again killed it in a way that most people will see that it was an attempt to carry out the reset. But the impact that France Afrique had in the continent of Africa is to be shameful and disgraceful for a foreign policy that never saw the continent of African nations as countries that can add value in terms of their own people's own need. France's presence in the continent of Africa, a number of people will question, but again, it goes back to the regional collaborative aspect of the documents that were being signed. And we've seen African nations who deposit billions of US dollars into the French treasury and a huge part of their reserve. If you see countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger cutting off from this unforgiving partnership, you should never question them. Africa is at a crossroad at the moment, and African countries cannot do it alone. They can work alongside partners, but it must be from the win-win partnership and from the collaborative perspective. These are amazing times with the current economic challenges globally, with the United States being unable to lead at this particular time in the global economy. The Chinese at the moment are opening their markets for African organizations. More importantly, African countries can trade with the country of China. We've seen African countries come under tremendous pressure, like Kenya and the rest. You may not agree with their own diversification, but African countries are facing tremendous challenges at this critical time in African history. Like France Afrique was the dumbest thing that ever happened to the continent of Africa. I want to thank you for watching. I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Smash the like button and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.